Following the tariffs introduced by Donald Trump at the start of March, Canada's patience has worn thin. In the initial days of the newly appointed Prime Minister's tenure, Ontario has launched a $110 billion trade measure against the United States, elevating tensions in North American commerce to an entirely new level. Earlier today, the Canadian province declared a 25% electricity surcharge on exports to the United States. This comes just after President Trump announced a decision to double tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel.
Donald Trump is firing back after Ontario implemented a surcharge on all electricity exports to the U.S. He's taken to social media to announce the 25% tariff on steel and aluminum entering the United States will now be doubled.
For several weeks, Canada has faced a period of uncertainty stemming from Trump's unpredictable stance. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has now responded by implementing a 25% countermeasure. The decision taken by Ontario is a bold one, carrying major implications not just for regional energy markets but for global economic relations. By imposing this additional tariff on electricity sold to the United States, Canada has placed a $110 billion burden on its neighbor, a move that could significantly reshape both diplomatic ties and the North American energy sector. Why has Ontario decided to raise the cost of electricity for the United States? How might Trump's trade policies impact Canada's economy? Most importantly, how will the country's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, navigate this crisis? This shift in energy policy signals broader political and economic shifts between the two nations. Under Carney's leadership, Canada is undergoing a period of substantial domestic and foreign policy changes. Ontario's newly introduced electricity surcharge is a clear message. The government has indicated that this fee may increase further if the United States continues escalating trade tensions. Over the past weeks, the province has been responding to daily tariff threats from Washington. The recent announcement confirmed that Ontario is raising energy prices for 1.5 million households across Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. This is a direct counter to President Trump's tariffs on Canadian exports. Doug Ford expressed his concerns, stating that American citizens are not to blame for this trade conflict. He emphasized that responsibility falls on Trump alone. The surcharge is expected to add an estimated $100 to the monthly bills of affected American consumers, bringing in revenue of approximately $300,000 to $400,000 daily for Ontario. Ford confirmed that this additional income would be allocated to lowering electricity costs for Ontario residents. With these measures in place, the United States will now bear a $110 billion annual burden on its electricity imports from Canada. Ford also made significant remarks regarding the future of Canada's relationship with the United States. He highlighted the resilience, wealth, and strength shared by both countries and underscored the need to focus on collective strengths rather than weaknesses. Additionally, Ontario has taken further retaliatory steps, including removing American alcoholic beverages from its Liquor Control Board stores and barring United States companies from participating in government procurement contracts. This action is in addition to the federal government's initial $30 billion counter tariffs on American goods. The electricity surcharge is being executed through a directive issued by Energy Minister Stephen Lexy to the Independent Electricity System Operator. Under this directive, any energy provider selling electricity to the United States is now required to apply a tariff response charge. The IESO will collect these additional funds on behalf of the provincial government each month. Ontario has also stated that the surcharge rate may be adjusted at any time based on further developments in trade relations. Reactions from U.S. states have varied. Minnesota officials downplayed the impact, stating that the province supplies only a minor portion of the state's electricity. However, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz strongly condemned Trump's actions, arguing that they had caused financial strain on ordinary American families struggling with high utility costs. He criticized the administration for fostering a trade war that serves the interests of billionaires while leaving citizens to deal with rising expenses. In Michigan, concerns centered on the reliability of the state's power grid. Matt Helms, a representative from the Michigan Public Service Commission, stated that although the financial impact on customers would be limited, disruptions to energy flow between Canada and the United States could increase risks of grid instability. He pointed out that electricity systems across the two nations are deeply interconnected, and any attempt to restrict these flows would make both countries more susceptible to large-scale outages. New York Governor Kathy Hochul ordered a review of the potential cost impact of Ontario's tariffs on her state. She criticized the federal tariffs as poorly thought-out policies that lacked transparency and economic justification. Hochul, a Democrat, argued that these tariffs have only created volatility in capital markets and added financial uncertainty for businesses and families. Trump's response to Ontario's move was swift and harsh. He accused Canada of being a serial tariff abuser and claimed that the United States no longer requires Canadian resources. Declaring that trade policies will now be fully reciprocal, he warned that any financial losses caused by Canadian tariffs would be reclaimed. On April 2, he vowed to take aggressive steps to counteract Ontario's measures. Ford responded by suggesting a reduction in hydroelectric power generation, further limiting energy exports to the United States. He also urged other provinces, particularly Alberta, to consider leveraging their energy exports, particularly the 4 million barrels of oil sent daily to the United States. In a direct message to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, Ford hinted that an energy export tax could be introduced as a form of economic retaliation. However, Smith rejected this idea outright, calling it an impractical and damaging strategy. She argued that imposing such a tax would result in job losses for thousands of Canadians and weaken Alberta's economy. Drawing a comparison, she stated that applying an auto parts tariff to Ontario would be equally disastrous. Beyond trade disputes, Canada's energy policies are also being shaped by environmental concerns and shifting international regulations. With Mark Carney stepping into leadership, there is heightened focus on his economic and trade strategies. Carney, a former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, won the Liberal Party leadership race with overwhelming support. His transition from Justin Trudeau is expected within days, and an early election may soon follow. Carney assumes office at a turbulent time. The White House continues to introduce chaotic tariff policies, disrupting economic relations with global trade partners. Trump recently imposed a 25% tariff on a wide range of Canadian and Mexican goods, adding additional duties on lumber and dairy products. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has indicated that steel and aluminum tariffs will resume by mid-March. Trump has openly suggested that economic pressure could make Canada more dependent on the United States, even referring to the idea of integrating Canada as the 51st state. These remarks triggered widespread backlash among Canadian consumers and policymakers. Trudeau warned that any threats to Canada's sovereignty must be taken seriously. In his victory speech, Carney emphasized Canada's independence, stating that the country will never be absorbed into the United States under any circumstances. He pledged to uphold retaliatory tariffs until Washington commits to fair trade practices. He also promised to reinvest tariff revenues into worker protections and economic development projects. Throughout his leadership campaign, Carney positioned himself as a crisis manager, having led central banks during both the global financial crisis and the United Kingdom's tumultuous exit from the European Union. Despite his economic experience, he remains a newcomer to politics and does not currently hold a parliamentary seat. He resigned from leadership roles at Brookfield Asset Management and Bloomberg Inc. to focus on government service. Carney has proposed a series of trade initiatives, including identifying new markets for Canadian exports and dismantling domestic trade barriers. He has expressed interest in re-evaluating capital gains tax policies, scrapping the consumer carbon tax and leveraging federal finances to fund major infrastructure projects. He described this approach as bold and essential for boosting Canada's economic strength. Canada has until October for national elections, but given the Liberal Party's fragile position in Parliament, early elections remain a possibility. Carney must determine whether to push for an election this spring, potentially leaving an interim government in charge during a volatile trade war, or attempt to govern with limited legislative support for a longer period. As tensions escalate, the outcome of these trade disputes will have significant consequences for Canada, the United States, and global markets. How Mark Carney navigates this challenge will define his leadership. Stay tuned for more updates, and do not forget to subscribe to follow the latest developments in global economics and trade policy.